Alright, so I played a game recently called Esoteric Ebb. It's a strange little game that deserves much attention. I wonder if there's a genre brewing here. Disco-like, Elysium light, Ebb a lot. Okay, that was terrible. Anyway, I would recommend the game, but I wouldn't be surprised if some people bounce off this game hard, and it's perfectly reasonable if they do. But I still do believe there's a lot of redeeming qualities here. What is it about? Boy, where does one even start on this? There is actually a lot going on here, but the general gist is that the player is a faceless protagonist, but they are still stuck within the confines of being a cleric, a sort of a policeman in a fantasy realm, tasked with investigating all sorts of magical phenomena, and this particular one happens to be an explosion in the tea shop, all at the behest of the local governor. But this occurred on the Goblin Watch, and in the Goblin kind of area, the governor tells the player to help them with the investigation. Of course, the implication being that he might be involved somehow, and the player is expected to suppress some of the evidence. Also, they are urged to complete the investigation before the election in 5 days. But what seems to be a simple terrorist act turns out to be much bigger than it first appears. Conspiracy is afoot, and all the little threads become unwound as cleric steps foot in the city. What did I enjoy? Well, humor, first and foremost. The game is clearly meant to be comedic. There are a lot of serious topics and surprisingly common discussions on the political theory, theology, history, and philosophy. Even psychology. But what stood out to me was the humor. When it hit, it really hit, making me laugh hard, and it's fairly common too. Still, I do wish there was more humor though. At the cost of a more coherent story even, but it is what it is. There was still enough of it to keep me entertained. Aside from that, I did enjoy at least some of the discussion. The writer definitely tries hard to explain every side of argument, no matter what it happens to be. At times there are moral implications of resurrection, at others there is a discussion about genocide and what it means in the long run, and much more. And it is fascinating to think about. Without spoiling too much, the talk about the goblin genocide is probably my favorite, for I truly could see where they are coming from. And while idealism has its place, the sheer facts are glaringly obvious, as at times it's clear that some people are simply incapable of reason, and only force would make them relent. And then, that wouldn't be enough. Explaining why it had to be this way. It's all fantasy, of course, but overall, the more I think about it, the more I wonder about all that. Yeah, okay, I did enjoy the discussions a lot, not just a little. It's just that there were a lot of discussions and I didn't enjoy all of them. Some are not as thought-provoking. Besides, I suppose I could mention the characters. Namely Snell and, well, everyone really. It's a strange thing to try and take a character out of a world and they are in and say, yes, that was amazing. Isolating the character for the sake of a simple praise. At least in this particular case. Because the aspects what I do find interesting or amusing or generally worth of note are interpersonal relationship and the simple reactions they have to each other. But I can freely admit that I was always looking forward to the reactions the goblin body would have to everything going on. More so than anything else in that regard. There are, of course, other highlights like, well, Sphinx for example. She was delightful. Or the hag, or the tavern keep, or the angel. It's strange how I have enjoyed female characters a lot more than the male on average. Anyway, yeah, characters, good stuff. But that's pretty much it. I suppose I can point out the rich history and the general backstory, but none of it was terribly interesting to me. It's more so what I admit it being impressive how much effort went into building all that, but it's not really a highlight for me. I could also comment on the art style, which is pleasant to both look at, fairly clean and easy on the eyes, despite being fairly simple, if somehow unique and recognizable. And also, I completely forgot to point this out when I was writing this, but I also like the UI, which is not really the UI itself, but I like the fact that you can press right-click and just see all the interactable objects, so you don't have to play that hidden object game which some games seem to use. It could be difficult to spot some tiny things on the ground, for example, but you right-click and it's very easy, and it's all convenient because you can do it while moving around. So that's another thing to praise. In addition, the exploration was well enough done. with some things needing the player to actually pay attention instead of blindly going from point A to point B, and I can definitely think of a lot of games to do that. Some things were hidden if they move too fast or simply don't look at things too closely, but I wish there was just a bit more exploration, with fewer boring tunnels and more imaginative locations like that place with a troll. Brr is great, by the way. Anyway, so, elephant in the room. This game is clearly meant to be Disco Elysium, and I just have to point out that I did not care for that game. It felt like whoever wrote it was stuck squarely and deeply up their own ass. At times there is a brilliance to the game, but as a whole I truly did not enjoy Disco Elysium. It felt both tedious and unlikable, and especially I have disliked the inner dialogue, inner voice mechanic, whatever that is. It's both confusing and annoying. It felt like every single event was interrupted by some snarky asshole who needed to make comments, and then pat himself on the back about how smart the comments were. It was exhausting, in a way. Meanwhile, Esoteric Ebb tries to do that too, and yeah, I dislike it here too. However, the problem here is that I actually enjoyed the game a hell of a lot more. And as well, there was actually a lot more being told to the player about both the current situation and the fact they are supposed to know, instead of just reacting to things. Like, someone would mention a historical event, and there is a skill check on recognizing that event with the inner voice. But there is also a tinge of personality to that information, making it less of an encyclopedia article and more so a reaction of someone who has read it and has to explain it to someone else. That particular part was both interesting and entertaining. It's just that a lot of the inner voice conversations just weren't that. Purple randomly went hardcore penis all, and Yellow kept swearing every other word and telling the player to steal stuff or backstab somebody. Wow, that sure added a lot to conversation. Constitution also basically didn't contribute at all. So most of the time it was me skipping everything except green and blue, who did have a lot of good stuff to say. And I was okay with that. Aside from that, I also do believe that there might be a little bit too much talking, which is stupid to say about a game which is about talking, but there's a certain balance to strike here. Meaning I often struggled to tell what was necessary, what was secondary, what was pointless but interesting trivia, and what was rambling for the sake of rambling and wasting time. Great example of that is the swearing gnome, was his name with all the books and the psychoanalysis. He never shuts up. Having an obvious, hey, he has a book quest, and then a bunch of, here's him talking for 20 hours, separation would be nice. Meanwhile, there's a generic dwarf guy who makes a huge one, but just one paragraph, and the game treats it like the longest thing imaginable. Hell, I'd rather speak with that dwarf. Maybe I would make a new dwarf friend. I mean, he seems like a chill guy. Why the hell not? While that gnome, I just dreaded every time I needed to come back to him. Oof. Anyway, Esoteric Ebb was definitely a game, and everyone is free to think whatever the hell they want to think about it, but I just wanted to share some of my thoughts. It's good. Pretty good. Yeah.